Ladies and gentlemen, how about we shake it up a little bit and start in Hebrews 11.
He's a pioneer.
Now, giving you the heads up, I'm going to be reading from the Satanic Bible, otherwise known as the English Standard. So, yeah, for those of you who know me, you know I barely have a command of the English language, let alone the King's English, so I'm making it easier for myself today.
Yeah, the King Jesus Christ.
Now, we've heard some great teachings over the last couple of days. Had the luxury of going after hearing about some great people like Joshua and the great accomplishments he had. We have David, we have the Samuel. The Banff that Samuel was, the great hero that Joshua was, that so many of these greats. And to continue along with that, I'm going to talk about lions. Now, Hebrews 11, verse 33. Who through faith conquered kingdoms, enforced justice, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, were made strong out of weakness, became mighty in war, and put foreign armies to flight. Now, there's kind of four main ideas with my teaching I want you to keep in mind. One, how powerful lions are. Two, fire bad. Three, life is short. And four, how does fear enact in our lives? Now, I was asked to teach about stopping the mouths of lions, and expanded a little bit on that, looking at the quenching the power of fire, escaping the sword, and being made strong out of weakness. Now, all we've been hearing about in the last today is looking at the Believers' Hall of Fame. Of the 10.5, 11 billion people that have existed or currently exist, there's only a few hundred that are written down that God found worthwhile enough to be able to write down so we can remember them, either for good reasons or really bad reasons, depending on who you were. And the acts of these people are able to help us serve as an example for us with our believing, or find ways to help us improve our relationship with God. And we get to see these great testaments of people that through their faith, they're able to conquer kingdoms, did amazing acts through the power of God because of their belief. Now, focusing a little bit with the stopping of the mouths of lions, every time I step to the side, it's going to be Mr. Science for a little bit. So for those of you that don't remember your biology class very well, let's talk about apex predators. I'm dead serious. Apex predator, if you think in the food chain, the food web, that what an apex predator is it's something that is not fed upon in its adult age. We think of that sort of as the top of the food chain. So when we think of a lion is an apex predator. A fully grown adult lion does not really fear something coming to attack it. That's why it's just laying around in the Serengeti, just doing nothing until it decides to go eat. We kind of have that sense. Now, if you live in certain places like Alaska or Montana, and you've been in areas where you know you're not the top of the food chain anymore, it's a very surreal experience, I'll tell you that. But a lion, the top, it doesn't fear being attacked by anything else. Well, you know, someone that's described as being a lion? Satan. In 1 Peter 5:8 says, "Be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour." Predatory species, they don't hunt animals that are bigger and stronger than them regularly. What they do, they try to find the weakest, the sickly, the old, the one that can't put up much of a fight. The one that is either the weakest target or the one that requires the least effort or the greatest chance of success. Satan's always looking to pick off the weak. The people that might be new in the Word, that don't necessarily know everything they do to defend themselves, or those that have gotten complacent in some things, or those that have started to stray away from the Word. God looks for the weak in order to take them up, and that's why we're continually reminded to be vigilant. Now, metaphorically speaking of lions, let's talk about actual lions. Turn to Daniel 6. So, Daniel, while you're turning there, quick recap, he was part of the Babylonian captivity. He was schooled in the ways of the Chaldeans, And because of his loyalty to his God and only continuing to serve him, God blessed him and his friends Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to ascend to very high levels in a pagan government. Now, it got to a point where Daniel was so popular that he was going to be placed as second command. In Daniel 6, verse 3, then this Daniel became distinguished above all other high officials and satraps, because an excellent spirit was in him. And the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. Then the high officials and the satraps sought to find a ground for complaint against Daniel with regard to the kingdom, but they could find no ground for complaint or any fault, because he was faithful and no error or fault was found in him. Then these men said, we shall not find any ground for complaint against Daniel, unless we find it in connection with the law of his God. Now, Daniel's working in a foreign government, and they're saying he does not have one corrupt bone or anything in his body. Or today, thinking that this is a person that works in the government that is not corrupt in any way, shape, or form. Just putting that in perspective for a moment. And they figure out, all right, the way we can put the screws to him is get him to do something against his God. Now, they trick the king to make a law that says, okay, you can't pray to anyone or ask of anything except through the king, if not, get thrown into a giant pit full of lions. All right, and the king gets tricked into signing this. And Daniel 6, verse 10, when Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he went to his house where he had windows in the upper chamber open towards Jerusalem. He got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he had done previously. I kind of see it that, all right, he gets the report of, okay, there's a new law, whatever. And he sits down and continues to do what he's been doing. He doesn't try to hide it. He's upstairs, windows wide open, and is continuing to do the same thing he does every day. Because the laws of his God are more important to him than the laws of man. Well, he gets busted, and he's going to be thrown into the pit of lions. Daniel 6:16. Then the king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast into the den of lions. The king declared to Daniel, may your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you. Now, thinking about these lions, if they were a form of execution, they're probably a little mistreated, a little underfed. He wanted to make sure that so you've got a giant pit of lions where they're constantly hangry, and Daniel's about to be thrown into it for a night. Now, the king wasn't that thrilled about it. He really liked Daniel, but the law's the law. Now, night passes, and starting in verse 20, as he, the king, came near to the den where Daniel was, he cried out in a tone of anguish. The king declared to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions? And Daniel said to the king, O king, live forever. My God has sent his angels and shut the lions' mouths that they did not harm me, because I was found blameless before him and also before you, O king. I have done no harm. Then the king was exceedingly glad and commanded that Daniel be taken out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no kind of harm was found on him, because he trusted in his God. Daniel had complete trust in his God. And because of that, it helped God to be able to present a solution. Little side note, remember I mentioned, hey, Satan's like a roaring lion? Oh, hey, God shuts the mouths of lions. You think there's anything Satan can do to you that God's not bigger than when it comes to your life? Just a little side thought. Now, looking around this time, we have a couple of other people that face a similar situation. They're actually friends of Daniel's. So let's go to Daniel 3. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. For those of you unfamiliar, setting the stage. Nebuchadnezzar made a giant golden idol. And whenever a mariachi band would play, everyone was to bow down before. Now, anyone who didn't would be thrown into a really hot, fiery furnace. Now, these 3 people were school friends with Daniel. These 4 supported each other spiritually as they're working in this government while their people are in captivity. And Daniel 3, verse 13, so they play Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego do not worship the golden idol. And now they're brought before the king. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in a furious rage, verse 13, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought. So they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said to them, Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up? Now, if you are ready when you hear the sound of the horn, the pipe, the lyre, the trigon, the harp, the bagpipe, and every kind of music to fall down and worship the image that I have made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you from my hands? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answer and say to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If it be so, our king, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. Now, what really stands out to me when they're talking is they say, if it be so. They had two frames of thought when it came to this. Either God was going to deliver them from the situation, or they were going to die and be resurrected again to everlasting life and be in the presence of their God. That is living a life with the mind of eternity. Their loyalty to God was more important than the physical lives at the moment and the predicament that they were in. They weren't quite sure if it was going to go one way or the other, but they were content with both decisions. And what happens? God delivers them. So we've got a couple of examples of people where God's done some really extraordinary things, but it all came down to their trust in God. Now, there's other occurrences of lions in the Bible. Let's turn to 2 Samuel 23. I noticed in some of my research that, sometimes things are brought along to help prepare us for bigger and better things, if we handle it well. We're going to talk about a man named Benaniah. In 2 Samuel 23, starting in verse 20. And Benaniah, the son of Jehoiada, was a valiant man of Kabzeel, a doer of great deeds. He struck down 2 Ariels of Moab. I honestly have no idea what those are. He also went down and struck down a lion in a pit on a day when the snow had fallen. And he struck down an Egyptian, a handsome man. What it says. The Egyptian had a spear in his hand, but Benaniah went down with a staff and snatched the spear from the Egyptian's hand and killed him with his own spear. These are the things did Benaniah the son of Jehoiada, and won a name besides the 3 mighty men. He was renowned among the 30, but he did not obtain to the 3. And David set him over his bodyguard. Now, I just thought this was really cool. One, he fought a guy, apparently a good-looking guy, but took his weapon and killed him with it. But what really stands out, Benaniah willingly chooses to jump into a hole with a lion on a day that it had snowed. Any of you have traction issues when it's a little snowy or icy out? If you're fighting a lion, do you think you need to be a little agile with what's going on? He goes into a pit where there's very little escape. And it's covered in snow, and he kills a lion. Just putting that out there. We're talking about when Aaron was talking about like really awesome. I mean, like this guy's pretty manly. When he just grabs a stick and he goes jumping in to kill a lion in a pit filled with snow. Now, this list of his qualifications. What happens? He's not appointed as a general. David set him over his bodyguard. And I was thinking about that. It's one thing to say, you're going to be in the command of troops. You're going to be in command of protecting me. That's what Benaniah was. He was set as the head of the bodyguards. And his acts that he did before that were helping in preparation for him to be in that very respected position to a point that David trusted his own well-being with Benaniah. Well, speaking of, another person that kind of got a little lion training, let's go to 1 Samuel 17. Jessica was just talking about David. And it took a little bit of time from David's anointing to David becoming king. And sometimes we look at God's timing and go, what's taking so long? And I think a lot of times it comes down to, when is the person ready? God's timing is great. You look at Moses, it took a good chunk of time before Moses was ready to lead the people out of Israel. What about David? He gets anointed at 16, 17, not ready to be thrown in as being a king. But in 1 Samuel 17, verse 32, David's already been anointed. He's sent by his family to go visit his brothers on the battlefield with the Philistines to bring some snacks. And he hears this loud, angry guy saying bad things about Israel and about their God. And he just won't stand for it. And he agrees to go and fight. And in verse 32, David says to Saul, "Let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine." And Saul said to David, "You are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are but a youth, and he has been a man of war from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant used to keep the sheep for his father. And when there came a lion or a bear and took a lamb from the flock, I went after him and struck him and delivered it out of his mouth. And if he rose again against me, I caught him by his beard and I struck him and killed him. Your servant has struck down both lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, for he has defied the armies of the living God." And David said, "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion, from the paw of the bear, will deliver me from the hands of this Philistine." And Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." So David's young, not super big. I mean, Saul was a head and shoulders above everyone else in Israel. Goliath was bigger than that. And we're bringing David along to go fight him. And David's listing his qualifications. Now, I want to place David slightly higher than Benaniah for a moment, because when you're, all right, he's fighting a lion. Someone took a sheep, he goes, he strikes the lion. If it comes back, he grabs it by the beard and punches it again. That's what he does. I'm going to let that sit for a moment. But he mentions these things that have gone through that God has delivered him from. And what happened? Well, because of this, apparently he was qualified enough to be able to destroy Goliath, which helped him to become part of the military, which helped him to become one of the leaders in the military, which eventually helped to train him to be a better king, one of the best kings Israel ever had. And it wasn't just, oh, you've now been anointed, get to work. It was a process training David to be in a position to responsibly handle what he needed to do. God working with us has a good idea of when we're ready for certain things, even though we might be ready and gung-ho, but it's like, nah, give it a moment. You're still cooking. And giving it some time before you're quite ready. Now, going through all this, it kind of made me think of the proverb with the three servants that were given money when their master was going away, and then you come back. Two of the servants invested the money, were able to make it multiply, and the third one buried it and wasn't able to do anything with it. And when the master is confronting his servants and finds out, oh, you guys have done well. In Matthew 25:21, you don't need to turn there. His master said to him, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your Lord." Person showed responsibility with small things, which helped to open up the responsibility for other things. For those of you that have children, you'll slowly start giving them little tasks, little responsibility, helping them to get ready for bigger things down the road. So the passage of Hebrews 11 speaks of faith. There are several people to go through uncertain circumstances because God tells them to. Or it's been mentioned, faith is the assurance of things hoped for. That title deed in heaven. And let's go back to Hebrews 11. So these people, these believers, trusted God. And it goes to a deeper level of that. Hebrews 11 verse 39, "And all these, though commended through their faith, did not receive what was promised." That was discussed earlier, that they were waiting for the Messiah. All the people listed here are Old Testament believers. They were waiting for the appearance of the Christ the first time. But that's the underlying idea behind their faith in God. That there is this Messiah that is promised that's going to come. God will present this. Why will he not present anything else? Will he not help out with anything else? With everything else. Hey, the first thing God told us when things went off the rails was there's going to be a solution. The promised seed. That was the first thing God told us after, right when the fall happened. And this Believer's Hall of Fame is not about great powers, awesome tricks, and everything. It was in believing in the Christ to come. Well, we're in a similar position today. We are waiting for Christ to return. And that idea of the hope of this coming back should be the foundation from all our believing is built off of. And when we start to get in our little hairy situations where we think, oh, they're different, they were special, I've really screwed up, can God really help me with this? Or like, oh no, I'm going to be like homeless in a week. I don't know, I'm scared. And I'm thinking like, is God going to be able to work this out? You want to turn to Ephesians 1 real quick. Because I want to talk about what God considers the most powerful act he has ever done. Ephesians 1 verse 19. And what is the immeasurable greatness of his power towards us who believe according to the working of his great might? That he worked in Christ when he raised him from the dead and seated him in his right hand in heavenly places. This is what God says is the most powerful act he's ever done. Raising Christ from the dead and seating him in the heavenlies. Now, I want to put that in perspective for a moment. One, God created the universe. You taken a look at it recently? Something infinitely large, self-sustaining, where you got this constant cycle of like stars born, dying, new material being made, to a point where you get a sphere like this that can perpetually sustain life. Hey, you ever taken a look at your circulatory system for a little bit? Yeah, God set all that up. We're fearfully and wonderfully made. And we start to think, is finding a job too big for God? He already says the most powerful thing he did was raise Christ from the dead. How do we know it happened? We speak in tongues. That was the most powerful thing he did. Everything else is small compared to that. So when it comes to hitting the level of greatness of some of these believers we've been talking about, I think it requires a lack of fear and a step of faith. Go to Matthew 8. Now, I mentioned, 1, how powerful lions are, 2, fire bad, 3, life is short. 4th thing I want to talk about was fear. How does fear affect our lives, especially if we're looking in light of eternity? Now, fear tends to short-circuit believing, and sometimes can affect the way God can interact in our lives. So Matthew 8:23, and when he, Jesus, got into the boat, his disciples followed him. And behold, there arose a great storm on the sea, so that the boat was being swamped by the waves, but he was asleep. And they went and woke him, saying, Save us, Lord, we are perishing. And he said to them, Why are you afraid, you of little faith? Then he rose, rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. Jesus comments that fear leading to little belief. So the fear kind of helps cloud what God's capable of doing in our lives. And to be honest, this is why it's an Angel 101. The training that every time you see an angel appear, first words out of their mouth, fear not. It is the most basic idea. When God was commissioning Joshua, be strong and of a good courage. Don't be afraid. I'm with you in everything that you do. So, well, honestly, think about it, that with all this fear and stuff, we remember Hebrews 13:6, the Lord is my helper. Whom shall I fear? Is there anything in this world that's bigger than our God? No. Now, a thing that comes to us that when we fear, sometimes we fear doing this, saying that, trying out for this, and it might be stopping us from being prepared for greater things. God knows a big plan for us, but he works with us as far as sometimes we're willing to go. And those people that sometimes when they know if they're going to die soon or they think the world's going to end, they start throwing away these ideas of some of the little fears like, oh, what are people going to think? What if I get embarrassed? Oh, what if I get hurt physically? What if I get hurt emotionally? Yeah, all this little stuff. Sometimes I remember my grandmother before she was about to shuffle off this mortal coil, she really didn't have fear of anything at that point. Because in talking with some older people, and they look back at the stuff in their youth, and they're like, you know, that was the stupidest thing that I was afraid of. It really wasn't important. And great freedom comes to do incredible things by having a little fear. Now, does it mean no fear? No. I think it's in Proverbs that says, do not be afraid of sudden fear. It's just you don't let it rule your life. And how do we go from big fear to trusting in God and a knowledge of His Word? Now, these people, they knew their lives were short, but their work, their trust, and their faith in God was bigger than the things that they were ever going to face. It's easy to get afraid. It's a survival instinct. We're built into that biologically, but we don't let it control our lives. Now, I personally, I wasn't raised in the Word. I've spent 32, I don't know when now, like 30 years. I was raised in like a family constantly filled with fear, and I've had to be constantly trying to rewrite that in my brain with what God says. It can be a struggle, but it's not an impossible task. But we shouldn't let it shut down some of our work here because we don't have much time here. Now, we kind of look at the Apostle Paul, and really in any situation we're in, you got 4 possible outcomes. So you're faced with a situation, 4 possible things happen. 1, God delivers you. 2, you go through it, but it's not as bad as you think, because God knows you're going to be fine. Did God deliver the Apostle Paul out of every little trouble he had? No. Did the Apostle Paul turn out okay? Yeah. God knew, like, it's just a stoning, you'll be fine. Well, there were some times that God definitely helped him out of a situation. There were some times it was like, my grace is sufficient, you'll be fine. Now, option 3, we get gathered before we have to face it. Or, option 4, could be the end of the line, but what's the next thing you see? Christ and God forever. So, why is it important to keep our thoughts on eternity? The knowledge about the hope that idea that no matter how bad things get, I am a son of God, I will live again, and it will be a time where I have no recollection of pain, sadness, anything. Anything that was ever negative in my life ceases to be in my mind. And I get to live with God and Jesus and you all and so many others forever. That's kind of comforting. You're like, you know what? Bring on the world at that point. But think about it. What was the first things the apostles were told when they saw Christ ascend in Acts 1? 2 men in white garments show up and say, what are you doing looking at the sky? He's going to come back. Get to work. That's what they say. The first epistle written for the churches was Thessalonians, talking about the hope. That was to be the foundation of their belief. Old Testament, it's the first thing they were told, and everything was to be built on that. New Testament, same thing for us with this administration. Now, it's easy to think that we might get in a situation too big for God to handle. Really? Or like, I've done something so horrible, how could I possibly ever make that good? How could God make that good? How many of you play chess? Chess players, you ever played someone who was a lot better than you? Yeah? And you just get your clock cleaned? Well, like a master chess player, no matter what move you do, they figure out a way to make it to their advantage. It doesn't matter what you try. They, a lot of times, will work it, and they will work it really hard against you. God's the master chess player. He sees all realities. He knows everything that will be. Can you really do something to screw it up enough that God can't work with it? No. It's a sign of arrogance if you think you can. So, remembering that we have these greats to look at to help inspire us to grow with our relationship with God and be able to trust Him, because we've seen so many things He's done with others. Why would He do anything less for us? Like everything in the Old Testament, those were servants. Those were employees. We're sons and daughters. Would God do less for us than He would for the employees? No. So, remembering that, times are going to be tough. Don't let fear stop us from doing some of the things that God may want us to do to help prepare us for bigger and better things. And remember that in the end, we're going to have a point where there's no more sadness, no more pain, no more death, no more anything but joy and love and happiness with God, with Christ, and with the family of God. That's all I have tonight. Thank you very much.